which will have to be paid
We'll just
for
break
in
into
the
that
future,
now because
and
the
will
South
make it
Australian
much
Premier
more
Mike Rann
difficult
has just
to
begun a
return
press
the budget
conference on his future. Let's listen in.
Surrounding my future as Premier. It's been well known in senior Labor circles for some time that I intended to step down from the office of Premier in the not-too-distant future. In discussions with senior colleagues earlier this year, I indicated that I would wait for an agreed successor to be chosen for an agreed successor. I wanted to avoid the invidious spectacle of a divisive leadership contest of the type that has continuously plagued South Australian Liberal Party. So I told my colleagues that once consensus had been reached about an agreed successor, I would consult with my fellow ministers and members of Parliament about a suitable date to pass on the leadership to the next generation. My preferred timing was for March 2012, by which time I would have been able to secure a number of outcomes for the state, which I've been working towards for some time. And obviously there's been a series of things happening this year in terms of the go-ahead for the hospital and the settling of the position for the new stadium and, of course, the saving of Arkaroola from mining. But most importantly, first and foremost for the future is the completion of the negotiations for the $30 billion expansion of Olympic Dam. This is a project that has been the subject of the most detailed negotiations for many, many months. Indeed, in the next few months, Kevin Foley and I will be immersed in the final round of negotiations that I believe will secure for South Australia the world's of 100 years. March 2012 also marked the midpoint in the current term of this Parliament. It has been an enormous privilege for me to lead South Australia during a time when we have together turned the state's fortunes around. No one today would dare describe South Australia as a rust bucket state as they did 9.5 years ago. We are now much stronger and more confident as a state than we were 9.5 years ago. And if you think about some of the things, the record jobs growth, more than 130,000 more South Australians in work, winning the air warfare destroyers contract, winning the next generation of submarines contract, the biggest project in the nation's history, going from 4 mines to 17 mines with another 30 plus more to keep going. And also, of course, the unlocking of Woomera, which in my view will be equal to the Olympic Dam expansion in terms of the economic future of our state. And then there's things that we've done in areas like social inclusion, reduction in homelessness in this state while it's gone up elsewhere, and projects as varied as our big commitment to mental health, the biggest investment in mental health in the state's history, but also a range of other things as well, including from the Premier's Reading Challenge through to the Royal Institution of Science. So many projects, many of which have come out of our Thinkers in Residence program, but of course all about aligning our state and its future to a plan. For years we'd seen promises, and now we've got a plan, a strategic plan that we're meeting targets on to transform our state's future. With more than 2 years to go before the next election, it remains my belief that there is no pressing urgency to make the transition in leadership right now. Accordingly, the best and most effective way of transferring the leadership is to work with my successor, Jay Weatherill, on some of the biggest challenges facing our great state. I witnessed Peter Beattie in Queensland assisting his deputy Anna Bligh in the months leading up to his retirement. I also observed how, as a result, that transition saw Anna so well placed to win the subsequent election as she did, with the smallest of swings against her party. It was the perfect transition. My intention to stay as Premier until March 2012 has, however, been affected by events of the past 10 days. It is no secret that on Friday, July the 29th, I had a meeting with the Treasurer, Jack Snelling, and a union official, Peter Malinauskas. At that meeting, I was told that the leadership issue had been resolved and an agreed successor, Jay Weatherall, had been chosen. I was told that it may now be better for me to vacate the premiership sooner than originally intended for March next year. Well, I'm not going to canvass the details of that conversation, except to say that it contradicted previous commitments, including allowing Jay and new Deputy Premier John Rao a year to establish their credentials to lead the state. I had not and did not object to the selection of Jay Weatherall as my successor. Indeed, I have previously said on countless occasions privately and also publicly that I thought it would either be him or John Rao who would take over as Premier. But I've never believed it appropriate for me as Premier to nominate or attempt to determine the selection of my successor. I was, however, disappointed with the leaking of selective details of that confidential meeting within minutes of it taking place, and in some cases before it actually did take place. It was agreed, however, that a transition timetable would be discussed upon my return from India. Unfortunately, the selective leaking of our conversation led to a torrent of speculation by commentators. That speculation is unhelpful for the government and for my party, but we can all live with that. I fought far too long and too hard to see the gains this state has made in the last 9 years damaged because of a dispute over the timing of my departure from politics, given that I'd already told party leaders that I was preparing to go early next year if a suitable and agreed successor could be found. If I have to rank the order in which I see my duty as Premier, it is this. My clearest and highest obligation is to the people of South Australia. My next is to my government, which I have a sworn obligation to lead to the best of my ability. My third duty is to the South Australian arm of the Australian Labor Party. Ours is a truly proud history, and one I venture to suggest with an equally proud future under Jay's leadership. I appreciate the assurances of Jay and other party leaders that I should step down at a time of my choosing. The public has a real interest in the question of the leadership of their state, and continuing speculation about the date of my departure would have been unhelpful to the government. So, the people of South Australia elected me, and they have a right to know when and why I am stepping down. So I therefore determined that in order to complete the job I have to do and to best assist Jay and the government in the leadership transition, that I will step down from the office of Premier on the 20th of October. That is just over 4 months sooner than had previously been understood. Now, with such vital and immensely complex negotiations currently underway regarding the Olympic Dam expansion, negotiations which will have an immense impact on South Australia and its people and its prosperity for the next 100 years, I would be failing in my duty and in my obligations to the state if I did anything which hindered the successful completion of the final round of negotiations which I'll be involved with the week after next. And Jay will be brought into that process. In fact, he's already been briefed by Kevin Foley, and Jay will today attend his first meeting of the Cabinet Committee on the Olympic Dam expansion. By nominating a date, the exact date for the orderly transfer of leadership, I believe I've ensured that those negotiations will remain on course, as will other important matters affecting the future of South Australia, and very few other things that I think will please you over the next 2 months. This is where my first duty lies. First and foremost to the 1.6 million people who make up our wonderful state. That heavy responsibility to South Australians puts it into proper perspective in the discussions that I had in my office 10 days ago. I've known Jay Weatherall for decades, as I knew his father George, who previously served for many years as a union official and as a member of the upper house. Jay is an experienced minister who has held a series of important portfolios since he was elected to Cabinet in March 2002. Indeed, he is one of the 5 remaining original ministers with me, Kevin Foley, Patrick Conlon and John Hill. I've worked with Jay on issues as diverse as child protection, disability, Aboriginal affairs, public sector reform, public housing, the environment, and most recently in education, about which we both have a profound connection. Given 9.5 years' experience as a senior minister, I have absolutely no doubt that Jay has the skills, commitment and passion to successfully lead the state to win the next election. He has my full support and he will continue to have my full support. And I'm confident that he will lead the Labor team to re-election in 2014. I will, I believe, leave my party in a stronger position than I found it when I was entrusted with its leadership in 1994. After the 93 election, we had only 10 seats in Parliament, and observers said that we would be out of office for a generation. They also said that the next Labor Premier was not in the Parliament and perhaps not even born yet. But much more importantly, I believe much more importantly, I will leave South Australia a much stronger state than it was when I was entrusted with its stewardship in 2002. So, thank you. I'm going to invite Jay to make some remarks as well. And then if there are any questions on the details of my transition to India, I'd be very happy to answer. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, normally we would stay with that press conference, obviously, but because we've got a few issues there with the quality of the line, we'll leave that there. That was the South Australian Premier Mike Rann with the announcement about his future. That was live from Adelaide. He's only just returned from a trip to India. That was yesterday, and while he was away, a deal was done which would see Education Minister Jay Weatherall take the leadership. It was up in the air as to exactly when that transition would take place. Mike Rann was saying his preferred timing was March 2012, but it sounds like he's been pushed into an earlier exit. He'll be stepping down as Premier on October the 20th. So just repeating that, Mike Rann just announcing he will be stepping down as South Australian Premier on October the 20th.